You're listening to episode 76 on the Air Hug Community Podcast. Hey, welcome back to the Air Hug Community, a place where you can come to listen to stories and conversations by guests and myself, and I am just like the average midlife mom next door. Stories and conversations that we have about literally how to live a life that we love. We talk about all sorts of topics relevant to midlife, from centering around worthiness and self-love and fitness and, of course, healthy habits, but family, relationships, and all sorts of things that creep into our lives at this stage of our life. So I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for joining us here, and let's get to it. Hey friends, we are in for a treat today. We have a guest who actually reached out to me to talk about a really, I think, timely and very interesting topic. So our guest today is Maryann LoRusso, and she is a San Francisco-based writer and editor with more than 25 years of experience covering fashion, culture, and lifestyle. She is a former executive, in fact, editor-in-chief at Fairchild Publications / Condé Nast, and an editor at Time Inc. She has interviewed and written hundreds of CEOs, celebrities, and fashion icons, including Vera Wang, Manilo Blahnik, Anna Sui, Kenneth Cole, Kate Spade, and the list goes on. Maryann's most recent endeavor is her own podcast, The More Beautiful, and I was just interviewed on that, so later you will see an episode that she's publishing with that coming out, and today she's back here talking with us about an idea that we had, that she had the idea to talk about this. And so I'm not going to spoil it. I'll just pop it in right here and we can chat about it. I think you guys are in for a super awesome treat. I mean, I'm just so excited to chat about this topic, and I'm thrilled that she pitched it. Hello, everybody. I am super, super excited today to introduce our guest. And because she actually found me, and I did a little chat with her that's going up on her podcast very soon. And I got back to her and I'm like, we need to chat more. And so she sent me a text about a day later. I'm going to read it to you. It says, "Hi, Judy. I got an idea for a podcast topic while I was running. Yay, you. I've been a magazine writer for decades, and for 20 years, I worked in New York as a fashion magazine editor journalist. Living in that devil wears Prada world, I witnessed unrealistic standards of beauty and weight, as most Gen X women did. And I'm so relieved now to see the next generation embracing all the body types, a healthier approach to fitness, and a more compassionate self-acceptance. I would love it if we could chat about how these impossible standards, affected our generation and both our careers, you as a health and fitness person and me as a journalist who's covered both beauty, fashion, health, and fitness." So that's where we're at today. So Maryann, let me ask you a question. What do you think is the common denominator from women in our generation about body dissatisfaction?
First of all, hi, Judy. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I'm so happy to be here. That is a really good question. And, going back to how Gen Xers were raised, we had so many images flaunted in front of us, right? Whether from magazines, billboards, television, images of thin women, of young, beautiful women. And of course, youth was the beauty standard, right? And being thin was the beauty standard. Just constantly, incessantly. I was watching a movie the other night, just glanced, it was on TV, and I can't remember the name of it now, but it was only from about 15 years ago. And there were jokes about overweight people, overweight women, I should say, in particular. There were jokes about pretty women versus not conventionally pretty women. I mean, this stuff was just all over the place. And I think particularly in the 90s when I worked in fashion magazines, the standards were overwhelmingly bizarre. We had, remember heroin chic, which was the thing, like the supermodels of the day, like Kate Moss and Cindy Crawford and all those guys. They were skinnier than models had ever been. I mean, at least our mothers grew up in a generation of, like the cinched waist with the feminine body. And these girls were now so skinny, they had no curves whatsoever. And that's what we saw on a day-to-day basis. And working in the fashion industry, I mean, I got to see it even, closer up because, I'd go to runway shows, I would, cover the fashion houses and the new lines, and it would just be everywhere. So not until this next generation started really rewriting that did we realize maybe how harmful it was.
Yeah, and I like to think, not that I like to think, I have this memory going back to, I'm a little older than you, the 70s. And I think this phrase, who knows, maybe it was written in one of those women's magazines from when we were very little, or you might not have even been born. But I remember Twiggy being the first model who was so ridiculously thin. And I remember three things. One was my mother always saying you could never be too rich or too thin. I remember her always being on a diet and sometimes losing weight and sometimes gaining it back. And, she had her successes according to her definition, right to the fact that she would be writing her weight down on the refrigerator. And we all saw it. And every single, I was a babysitter, teenage babysitter. Everyone I babysat for, every single mother was always on a diet. And I never got it because they actually didn't seem to ever look any different to me.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I don't remember firsthand seeing Twiggy, but my mom talked about Twiggy. It was sort of a joke, if she saw quote skinny woman, she would say, "Oh, they look like Twiggy." So I heard of Twiggy.
Twiggy, yeah.
I'm a 1969 baby, so I was little when Twiggy was at her peak, or I wasn't. I'm not sure. Was she a 60s or 70s? Probably 70s. But that
Yeah, I'm not sure.
said, my mom was the same way. I mean, she had this little calorie book that I remember. It was like a pocket-sized book that she used to carry around with her, and she would count calories all day long. She, at one point, was on diet pills, as a lot of her generation was. And I
Mhm.
actually have a crazy story that I just remember now. I was probably around 2 or 3, and I remember to this day, I have the memory of it. I was jumping on my mom's bed because that's what kids did back then.
Yes.
And I remember watching her come into her room and put her diet pills in the top drawer of her bureau. And she left the room, and I immediately climbed onto the dresser. I don't remember how I did it. I was a toddler. And I took the diet pills. And of course, back then, there were no child safety latches. And I consumed half the bottle. And then next thing you know, I was in an ambulance. I was getting my stomach pumped. I mean, it was crazy. I mean,
Oh
can
my
you
gosh.
imagine?
Oh, wow. But what a memory, right? And probably not all that uncommon, right? You wanted to be like mom.
Right.
Yeah.
Those were her quote vitamins.
Her vitamins. Right. Yes. They always had code names. Yeah. What's interesting, I think, is coming from a fitness background. I will say that when I was a younger woman, it was about the number on the scale. And, I was always very resourceful and wanted to learn how to become fit and do it on my own. And a lot of it was because I had 4 little kids and a husband that worked a lot. But as the more I got into it, the more I realized that there were things could go terribly wrong if you just wanted to be thin. And I actually thank my lucky stars that I had a little health background and did enough research. And I remember one particular, we had been on vacation at the beach in Mexico, and I came in with my 2-year-old who was still napping at the time. So while he was napping, this talk show came on, and I can't remember what it was. It was a guy host. I'm sure it's not on anymore, but the guest was a woman who repeatedly, and maybe we're going somewhere we shouldn't, but she was a bulimic.
Mhm.
And I actually didn't even know about bulimia at that point. And I was already like 34 years old, but I guess, I don't know, somehow it escaped me. But I sat there and I felt so sad for that woman that I'm like, how important could a number be?
Right, right. I remember Karen Carpenter, my mom talking about Karen Carpenter and how I think
Yes,
she died of anorexia. Or I can't
she did. That's right. I had forgotten about that too. Yeah, 70s.
Right. So I did hear a little bit about that growing up. And, right before I hopped on this call with you, I looked up some stats and I was astounded. According to research from last year, about 24 million people in the US have an eating disorder, according to the National Association of Anorexia Nervosa and Associated Disorders. And eating disorders are among the deadliest mental illnesses, second only to opioid addiction, resulting in some 10,200 deaths every year in this country. So it's not a problem that really has gone away.
No.
It's getting worse. I mean, of course, the population is increasing, so I don't know, how that stacks up in terms of the numbers, but we still have to keep on it, right? And make sure that our girls are growing up with healthier outlooks than we did.
Yeah, with a much better message. One thing that, and I have a couple daughters and sons too, was always very conscious of, I want you to know, and they would see me cooking healthy and they would see me weighing and measuring, which is something that am very comfortable doing. But I would always say, this is a health conscious journey. It's not a skinny conscious journey.
Right. And also, Judy, I noticed growing up too that all those efforts my mom and her sister and my grandma were putting into their diets in an effort to lose weight were not working. There was a lot of obesity in my family, regardless, and health problems. And I think that was my motivation to, like you said, focus on health instead of weight, because I saw, like, first of all, it was a losing battle. The more they tried to lose weight, the more that they counted calories. It really didn't work for them, and they were yo-yo dieting,
Hmm.
and I also felt like they were being so hard on themselves that the joy was being kind of sucked out of their lives, when they tried to quote diet. So my sister and I grew up, seeing all these amazing women struggle with clinical obesity, and then eventually get diabetes, heart conditions, cancer. So my sister is kind of, I know you and I spoke about our sisters a
Yeah.
while back, but we have very supportive siblings, you and I. And my sister and I, have been on this journey together to sort of remain healthy, and we egg each other on, how many miles you did today, but in a fun way. And
Yeah.
we eat healthy, we eat a lot. I eat a lot. God knows I can pack it away, but I eat
Yeah.
healthy food and I enjoy myself, and I don't beat myself up when I gain a couple of pounds.
Exactly. Yes. The joy pounds, and I'm calling them joy pounds, that I gained over the holiday season. Um, it's like 2 or 3 pounds, like fine. It was
Right.
things that we only get once a year and still eating healthy. But one of the big things I think that has changed in our generation is there is a big push to be more healthy versus weight on a scale. And it's no longer taboo for women to actually get stronger. In fact, we realize now, I think it's becoming more common knowledge for women to understand that the stronger we are, it doesn't mean we're going to look like, a big bodybuilding, hulky kind of person. I mean, first of all, we just don't ever have the hormones to do that. We don't make enough growth hormone. We don't make enough testosterone. We will never look like, what do I want to say?
The
Big,
Rock.
bulky women. Yeah, like Rocky with boobs, right? We want,
You were
because
saying
we,
Rocky, I was saying The Rock.
oh, okay, got ya. Um, but I love to make that point because I really feel like becoming strong is the message is getting across, and people are understanding that strong is healthy and that strong women naturally are leaner. They don't have to, it's not that you don't have to work at it. It's just the lifestyle of, maybe you do have dessert once a week or whatever, and you don't have that feeling of like, okay, I got to go now. The next day I got to wake up and eat only half. And I think women are doing so much better at that.
Yeah. And by the way, if you want to get a sense for kind of what women were going through in the 80s in terms of diet and fitness and what they were exposed to, you have to watch the Jane Fonda show that Rose Byrne plays Jane Fonda in this series. And I forget what platform it's on, but it's really good.
Oh, thank you.
Actually, she's not playing Jane Fonda. I don't want to get sued. She's playing a character that is similar to Jane Fonda.
Oh, got you.
Very
Okay.
similar.
All right. Interesting.
Yeah. But I have a question for you, actually, Judy. Do you feel like, because I certainly feel this way sometimes, that we are a nation of extremes? Because I think it's so great that we're now seeing so many diverse images of women everywhere. You go shopping for clothing and you see all body types, right? Not to mention all, ethnic diversity. Just it's remarkable and I love it. But sometimes I see, rappers or, celebrities on TV, and they've got these artificial booties, teeny tiny little waists, and now that's supposed to look natural. I feel like kind of we swing one way or the other. Do you feel sometimes that we're going in another direction that we shouldn't be going?
Well, it's interesting because the short answer to that would be yes. I do feel we are a nation of extremes. I feel like we're a very almost black and white kind of binary thinkers. And so if we're not going to be twiggy, we're going to be like really big, I know now the big booty and the tiny waist. I did have an alarming conversation at one point in time with a woman that I came across. She was a healthcare worker, an aide, in fact, in the nursing home where my dad was years ago. And people always talk to me about fitness because they know. And she's like, I'm really trying to get a bigger booty. She said, so I'm eating everything I can and I'm trying to put on like 40 pounds. And I didn't even know how to respond. And I'm like, well, how do you know those 40 pounds are going to go where you want them to go? I'm
That was
thinking,
what
but
I was thinking. Yeah.
right. I mean, listen, if I could wish where the pound, where the bulk would go, right. But it doesn't work that way. And I didn't really even know how to respond to that. I was so taken back. But that's a great example of, yeah, I do feel it is extremes. And, those people, exactly, those are not real body parts, and listen, I'm not judging anyone for getting any kind of enhancements that they want. But I think it's important for people to know that those big butts, number one, are probably not real and they're probably not healthy.
Right, right. Yeah, of course. I'm not judging anyone either for, enhancements. But, when my daughter sees this photo of a woman who's, 38, 22, 38,
I don't even know how that's possible.
I know it could be even as harmful than seeing, as harmful as seeing someone who is skinny, unhealthily skinny.
Yeah.
I just feel like, I just wish we could kind of strike a happy medium and be who we are, and
Yeah. I have a question about a supermodel, and I don't know if you ever had a chance to have anything to do with her, but I remember once on camera, she always looked beautiful, poised, blah, blah, blah. It's Tyra Banks.
oh yeah.
But I remember Tyra Banks was not skinny, skinny.
She had her own talk show, didn't she?
She had her own talk show. She had it was a reality series. No, she did what was it? America's Next Top Model, but she also had a talk show.
Yeah, that's what I remember.
I looked up from like 2000, maybe 5 to 11 in the early, whatever, those years. But I remember reading that she was a size 8. And I was like, oh my God, that's so exciting. She is beautiful. I mean, she
Yeah.
just was beautiful. She had curves and she just looked to me like a picture of health.
Yeah, I mean, I remember seeing her on her talk show, and I think she was discussing her kind of struggles with weight, how she'd go up and down, and I think at times she was a little hard on herself too. I mean,
Mhm.
think about all the women, all the beautiful women who were hard on themselves, including Oprah, right? Do you
Yeah.
remember that episode of Oprah when she wheeled out all the fat, the animal fat, to represent how much weight she had lost? And I think she said years later that she regretted doing that episode because it put so much focus on her weight.
And so much pressure on her to write. All eyes are looking to see, well, is she going to stay that way? And yeah, that's tough.
Yeah. But I do, hear my daughter who's 19 and her girlfriends, they don't talk about counting calories. They don't talk about being thin. They're sort of just laid back about the whole thing, and I love it. I don't know if that's San Francisco or just their generation in general, but they make fun of the people out there who are going to extremes. And they know it's not healthy. They know it's for show or it's an act for celebrities. They know all of that. And they seem to be really aware, which I'm really happy about.
I think they're definitely much more informed than we were.
Hmm.
And as much as social media is out there, I do think for the most part, they're kind of more aware of the fact that it's a curated, it's a highlight reel.
Yeah. And they also have, they have inspiration from people like Billie Eilish, who I have to admit, I did not understand when she first came out, how she dresses and all that stuff. But I saw her on Saturday Night Live a couple of weeks ago, and I kind of, a light bulb went off. Like, I kind of realized why she's doing it, why she's wearing the oversized clothes, the oversized androgynous clothes that hide her body. And, she could have other reasons, but to me, it took the focus away from her body and judging her as a woman and how she looks. And it put the focus on her voice, on her music, on her beautiful face.
Mhm.
And there's something to be said for that.
There is something to be said for that. Is it for that? That's really interesting. I missed that, but correct me if I'm wrong, but hasn't Pink kind of been coming around to being more, what do I want to say, au naturel versus?
I don't know. I haven't seen Pink in a I love her voice. I love her music, but I kind of lost touch with what she's doing.
Yeah, I feel like, and I could be wrong, maybe someone will put in a comment and let us know, but I thought maybe she was, the last time I saw her, she just looked a little bit more like the girl next door,
Mm.
which I thought was really interesting. And what about, okay, hold on. Jamie Lee Curtis
Jamie Lee. Yeah,
had not been afraid to like go gray, and I know a lot of women, like I personally don't want to go gray, but I kind of like my hair color. um, but I just admired the fact that she was like, this is who I am, and this is what I saw a post of her in whatever age. She's like at least in her 60s. She might be in her mid 60s. And there was something she put up and she's like, this is what 60 whatever looks like.
that I know. I love her. She's been a proponent for aging gracefully and naturally, and I admire that so much.
Yeah,
I really do.
I do
It's
too.
funny. It's funny, but I was watching an '80s movie with the kids. They hate '80s movies, but every once in a while, they sit down and watch with me. Um, and I can't remember what it was, but there was a scene in a department store where they were referring to, or there was a sign that said husky area or chubby children's section. And all of a sudden, it took me back to when my mom would take me shopping, and we were in the kids' clothing department, and there was a section, for the kids who were heavier.
Yeah.
And my daughter said, "That is terrible, Mom. I feel so sorry for those kids." And she's right. Can you imagine that even happening today?
Yeah. Wow. I forgot about that. Yeah. And back as early as, remember size 6X with little girls, they could be 6 or they could be 6X if they were like wider but not taller.
I just
And I
remember
think,
those sections because I just think
yeah,
like, oh, wow, like these kids are getting banished to that section in the corner, and
yeah,
they're
it was
probably
not
yeah,
attractive.
right.
Wow, we've come a long way. I really forgot about that.
I know.
But I'm like, when did this start? Like, you ever look at Lucille Ball or Marilyn Monroe? They were not little women.
No.
And they did Lucille Ball had a great, I'm gonna call this amino pot. Like when you're postmenopause and you're a little round, she didn't even appear to notice it. And I'm like, oh, that's awesome. But somewhere
She was
along the
a
line,
feisty lady. Yeah.
yeah,
I
right?
mean, everybody has a different body type, right? We have to embrace who we are and love ourselves. I
Yeah.
mean, if anything, talking about the sizing, I feel like again, we're a nation of extremes. We went from having the chubby department to now I feel like we're doing all this vanity sizing.
Yes.
Like I am the same size I've been for probably 30 years, and my size has gone down, right?
Hmm.
There never used to be a size zero. Now there's a double zero. There's an extra, extra small.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it is crazy.
It is crazy. And I do feel like on one hand, we're doing really good because we're seeing a lot of more diversity in models and, with clothes from all the sizes. And on the other hand, I feel like sometimes we take a step back because it's still perfectionism.
Right, right. I mean, if we're going to change the sizes, let's just change the size. Let's just not let people who are like, I'm tiny, I'm 5'1". So I don't want to feel like I'm shrinking, you know, just let's just rewrite what size two is or four or whatever.
That's one of the big gripes that a lot of us have, and I've talked to a lot of women about this, is amongst different brands. I mean, I could be a 0, a 2, a 4, or a 6, depending on the brand I choose.
Right. And I find that in the industry, the European brands stay true to what they've always been. They
Yeah,
keep the sizing very, authentic. And then the American brands are the ones who really changed.
they're changing them. Yeah. I think definitely that maybe we can't change that. So maybe we just have to change how we react to that.
Exactly.
It's kind of like we can't change the stress in our life, but we can change how we react to it and not let a number be so important to us, you
So
know?
true. But it's harder to do that when you have a daughter, I find, because I was able to ignore all of that stuff before I had kids. And I think now I'm trying to see through their eyes, what are they thinking about all this, And because, especially when they're tweens, they're very impressionable.
Yes.
And, as a mom, I was paying more and more attention to it. And then they call me out when if I say something that sounds outdated.
Yeah, my kids will do that too. They're like, Mom. Yeah, I'm like, oh, yeah.
Right.
It's funny because my husband is Hispanic. He's from Cuba. He was born in Cuba, and the Cuban culture, like, has no problem calling people fat
Right.
or chubby or, gordo.
Gordo.
That's just like, it totally, everything is politically inappropriate in the way they grew up and describe people. But they actually say those terms with affection. There's no judgment. But listening as an American, I would listen to his family and his parents, and I'm like, they're so mean. And he's like, no, they're not mean. It's more of a term of endearment. So I almost think like, wow, we should learn to be not so sensitive. They're just talking about so and so is round. That's just them,
Right.
and I'm
Right.
like, wow.
It's a descriptor, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Oh, my kids and I argue about this all the time because we are in extremely progressive San Francisco, and I call my kids the PC police. They're always lecturing me. Gen Z, the PC police, they're always lecturing me, and we have these really funny conversations. But we were on the topic about because I'm relearning my Spanish. I studied Spanish in high school and college, and I'm relearning it on Duolingo. And my daughter Ava said to me, "How are they doing the pronouns thing? In Spanish speaking countries because you have feminine and masculine articles." And I said, "That's a good question. I don't know
Oh,
the answer to that."
that's a really good question. Wow. My sister-in-law is a Spanish teacher. I have to ask her.
Yeah, find out.
I'm,
Get some
I'm,
intel.
wow. Right. There's no they in Spanish.
I
It's
mean,
el or la.
it's ellos, right? Which is masculine. So you're using the masculine they when you talk about men and women.
Right. Right. That's right. Hermanos, brothers and sisters.
Hmm.
I used to always get that wrong because I'd be like, no, yo tengo cinco hermanos. And then the teacher would say, all together. And the teacher would say, I thought you were the youngest of 8. I'm like, yeah, but I have 5 brothers. And she'd be like, well, you got to count the sisters too. I'm like, but
Right.
you said hermano. And she's like, no, 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 no. That means everybody. I could never get that right.
Women are just folded into the men, into the group of men.
Isn't that interesting? Gosh. Well, I think it's interesting that I do feel we've come a long way, but I do feel we have a long way to go.
We do. We really do.
We do. And what I think the best thing we can do is put health in front of vanity.
I agree. I agree. And, for all the moms out there, I want to say, you know, and I'm saying this because I hear my girlfriends doing this in front of their kids, and we can't help it. It's almost like our generation was conditioned to talk this way. After a big meal, saying, "Oh, I'm so full, I have to go back to my diet tomorrow," or saying, "Oh, I'm up 4 pounds, I got to work out, 5 times next week." I mean, when we talk that way in front of our children,
Yeah,
it sends signals to them whether we realize it or not. You know, they're
absolutely.
they are locking that all away in their brains, and they're thinking about what that means for them and their bodies. And you just got to be careful, you know?
That is something that has been on my mind for a long time. And I very much tried not to say it out loud, but I will tell you, it has taken, I don't know how long, it's decades, because my daughters are in their 30s, where I haven't said it, but to not think that way has been another big challenge. Like, just get up. And my mantra for the last few years, and my sister taught me this, no matter what, you just do the next right thing. There's no overcompensating, there's no undercompensating. And I love that. It's like, always just do the next right thing. What is the best way to treat yourself?
I love that. It
Yeah.
takes the pressure off because you're just, it's kind of one day at a time, one step at a time, living in the moment. I
Yeah.
love that. I'm going to borrow that.
Yeah. I'll tell you, I write it all over the place. The two things are treat yourself right versus treat yourself, because it's not, again, it's this binary world with treat or punish. It's not that, and maybe we enjoy a treat. So great. Just do the next right thing. Drink your glass of water, have your healthy meal, and don't think about it.
You bring up a really good point because if we focus on how we feel and not how we look, I think everything is going to be better, right? If we focus on how did eating that pastry just make me feel? It made me feel really sluggish,
Mhm.
really, really tired. Instead of saying, "Oh, I'm going to have it, it's going to go to my hips." Because at the end of
Right.
the day, really, who cares about your hips? It's how you feel. It's how you want to age well. You want to be healthy and energized, well into your 90s. And if that's your goal, to be healthy and be doing stuff in your old age, then you got to focus on how you feel.
Exactly, Maryann. And you know what it comes down to? What you're talking about here is a mindset.
Mm-hmm.
It's a whole mindset. And, I just wonder if, like, with all the experience you had and what was written in the fashion industry, if what we were just absorbing in the years prior, versus what our kids are absorbing. Hopefully we're sending a better message. And we actually have a responsibility to do that.
We do. But I think the stuff that you're doing, the stuff that other, fitness and health experts are doing it's just a step in the right direction. And it's so inspirational. So thank you for all the stuff you do.
I'm trying, and thank you. It's also something that I feel very strongly about. I feel strongly about women trying to be healthy first, and also loving themselves first. And it just sounds sometimes like an overused message, but I do try to walk the walk and let people just, they can see it in my actions more than in my words.
Yeah, self-love is so important. We talk about it a lot, but if you really stop to think about what it means, right? It's the basis of everything. A few days ago I posted a quote from Lucille Ball, speaking of Lucille Ball,
Wow.
and she said something like, you need to love yourself to get anything done in this world.
Oh, I know that quote. Yes.
Yeah. If you don't love yourself, you can't get anything done in the world. And that is so true. It's not,
She was a pioneer.
everything you accomplish comes from that. Although I will say I watched the Being the Ricardos movie with Nicole Kidman a couple weeks ago, and Lucy was fantastic. She was a dynamo, an inspiration, but she was hard on her co-star Vivian. What's her name?
Oh, Vivian Lee.
Not Vivian.
No, not Vivian Lee. Not
Yeah,
Vivian Lee.
Vivian
I'm
Lance.
thinking Gone with the Wind.
I know.
God.
Yeah, she wanted to keep Vivian Lance, um, to use that old term, chubby, so that I think she would look better in comparison. And she was having food sent to her room, big breakfasts. She wouldn't let her wear the sexy dress because, Ethel had to be frumpy. So it was interesting, she had that one little flaw of like holding another woman down. So it was interesting.
Oh, wow. I did not know that. How about that?
Yeah. So that's the other thing. We have to really think about how we view and treat and think about other women. A friend of mine admitted to, oh, it was my hairdresser. My hairdresser admitted to me, we were talking about this very topic. And she said that when she walks down the street, she realized she sometimes subconsciously judges other women. Like she'll see a woman, for instance, with a crop top, that she maybe thinks she shouldn't be wearing. And she think, oh, she's too heavy to wear that crop top. And now she's become so aware of these thoughts that she stops herself, says, no, what are you doing? She's a beautiful person. She can do whatever she wants. Like, why are we slamming other women? And it's because, again, we grew up in this comparative society when women were competing against one another, or so the media wanted us to think.
Yeah.
Right? Who was the skinniest? Who was the prettiest? Look at this supermodel. Look at that one. And we really have to rewrite those messages in our brain because they're harmful not only to other women but ourselves and womanhood in general.
They're really harmful to women in general. I've thought about this a lot, in fact, and I have played a little trick with myself because I used to have those thoughts. If I would see a large woman, and I'm just relatively speaking, a large woman in a bikini, my initial thought used to be like, oh, I feel so sorry for her. And now I'm like, holy crap, I am so impressed by her because she has the confidence and the audacity to go out there and wear whatever she wants and put a smile on her face. And now I look at all people who dare to wear whatever they want, whether it's what society decides is beautiful or not. I look at those as the strongest, most inspirational people out there.
I totally agree. I completely agree. I was watching a movie with Nicole Kidman and Jennifer Aniston and Adam Sandler. And there was a scene when the two women were doing a hula competition in Hawaii and they were on stage. And then a larger sized woman came onto the stage and she immediately got discarded, just like wiped off the stage. And the host made a comment that we've got the two hot chicks, up here. Now this movie is only like 12 years old.
Wow.
We're still making quote fat jokes and with women, always women, not men, women, the brunt of those jokes up until very recently.
Yeah.
Until like this whole, I don't want to say Me Too necessarily, but the Me Too movement started along the same time as this like body image kind of thing started, right?
Mm-hmm.
And only in the last like 5-10 years have we started to see women of all shapes and sizes on.
Being accepted. So here's a question. Do you think that's a coincidence? I don't think so.
What is the coincidence?
That the Me Too movement and this whole acceptance kind of happened concurrently?
That's a really good question.
I wonder.
The Me Too movement is spurring all sorts of other movements, right? I think women are suddenly waking up to the fact that they don't have to accept everything that was handed down to us. They don't have to accept the patriarchy. They don't have to accept the way they were told the world has to work. We can change that.
Yeah, we can be worthy just as we are right now. It's not a conditional worthiness. Right. And that's the thing I think we need to work on most. It's another way to put self-love, is that our worthiness, just by the fact that we breathe, we are worthy.
Right. And we have to think about why we were judging other women, why thinner women were the thing to be. And maybe it all comes from men, right? What they wanted or needed, or I don't know. It's interesting. I don't know where it came from. But
I have a theory.
What?
So my theory is it comes down to money. I mean, you have an entire industry that, like, okay, diet pills, right? When you're a little girl, if your mom would like just take these diet pills, then she could be young and sexy looking. or whatever their marketing slogan was. But I feel like it comes down to marketing in a whole industry that, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I'm not really in that industry. You have been around it more than I have, but
No, it's always about money. You're absolutely right. But then you have to look at it on the flip side, like is the fact that all of these companies now have so many plus size models indicative of the fact that they know if they don't, they're not going to make any money. So,
yeah.
you know, that's also something to observe.
Yeah. And again, we don't have to go to extremes. Let's just represent everything. It's
Right.
kind of like the white men are underrepresented now because there's so much diversity.
And I
So
remember reading that Victoria's Secret was in trouble. I could be wrong, but I think they were in trouble a couple of years ago because they were like one of the few retailers that didn't yet embrace, um, expanded sizing and all of that, and that they finally got on board. I think whenever you have a market demand, things are going to change. So that's
yeah,
certainly. I don't think companies are doing it for the morality or to be nice. I don't think that's the only reason they're doing it.
no, they want to stay in business. Yeah.
Right, clearly.
Yeah. So this has been really interesting. I really want to thank you for hopping on and talking about this. And first of all, for coming up with the idea.
This is an idea that I think a topic a lot of women, I think, have been wrestling with.
Yeah, I think so. So, maybe we'll talk about it again. And I'd love to know what you listeners out there are thinking. You can always drop a line, but I will put in the show notes where people can find your podcast, which is More Beautiful.
Yep, the More Beautiful podcast.
Yeah. And take a listen to it, folks. And I'll also put your website in the show notes. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Judy. It's been so much fun.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we did. We thoroughly enjoyed chatting about this and really bringing a lot of things to light. So if you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to share it with your friends, leave a review and a rating over on Apple Podcasts. And I will see you here next week on the Air Hug Community Podcast.